Sampford Peverell's church, St John the Baptist, has foundations which date back to Saxon times. The present church was constructed in the mid-1200s, with additions in the 1500s funded by the community's most famous resident, Margaret Beaufort, Countess of Richmond, and mother of King Henry VII. Some 200 years ago, the wooden spire was replaced with the current crenellated stone tower. From 1863, the rector, GWR Ireland, funded a major restoration of the church. The final additions in 1870 were the lean-to vestry and the replacement clock mechanism. The clock, made by Gillett and Bland of Croydon, has this date cast onto the iron flatbed frame, and the present dial could date from much earlier. The single dial on the tower's south side is very exposed to our West Country weather, and has deteriorated over the 50 years or so since it last had refurbishment. The gold leaf of the numerals had worn very thin, and were indistinct against the fading background. The PCC and church wardens organised a community-wide effort to support the cost of restoration. Groups, families and individuals were readily found to sponsor the re-gilding of the hands, numerals and minute markers. Smiths of Derby, a very well respected company in this field, were commissioned to do the work. It was expected to be completed over 2 days in June, with all aspects of the work being done on site by their clock restoration expert, Stuart Morrison. Working on a dial midway down the external face of a tower requires special techniques. Ladders are rightly no longer considered safe at that height, so the company uses a team of 2. One is a climbing and safety specialist who assists the clock expert. Jason Budd from Southern Rope Access has gone ahead and secured the abseil ropes down the tower. Then, donning full climbing harness and laden with attachments, Stuart begins his ascent of the tight stairways. He passes the clock as he goes. It's still enclosed in its wooden case. The metal stairs are a fairly recent update from the ancient rickety wooden ones many older residents will remember. And, as many thrilled and nervous school children of the past will have done, as a rite of passage, he crosses the belfry, traversing the narrow frame between the bell wheels, and uses their rims for balance. And up the final ladder and onto the roof parapet, where Jason awaits him. Stuart is very experienced in rope techniques in his own right, but is always accompanied by a rope safety specialist when working at height. There's a fine view to be had from up here on a clear day, but the weather's not to be trusted for too long. As Stuart begins his descent, some showers come by, making the rope much more slippery for him.
Take the tools down with me, Jace. I'll pass them down. You sure, mate? Right, okay then. I'll go down and suss the job out anyway. Yeah. Let's let you know what we need. Ooh, my ropes are wet. Jason. That, brilliant mate. I thought that was a drill coming down then. Tidy. See, you're there, mate.
Having detached the hands from the dial, which are bagged and lifted away by Jason, Stuart can now concentrate on the dial itself. First he drills a series of new holes through the rim and into the stone. These will be plugged and used to rehang the dial after refurbishment. It's currently held in place by 7 square section iron pins driven directly into the stone at the edge, with their bent over heads securing the dial in position.
I've had to go a bit further than what I want because the stone's not great. I'll put the clips in and then you'll get the tension. What I might try and do is manipulate these fixings a little bit, see if they come undone, and we might be able to do it in one hit. Okay, mate? I'll take that out. Yeah. And you tie the wire.
Using a couple of the newly drilled holes, Stuart fits small shackle bolts to the dial rim. Their position is chosen carefully to allow the rope strops, lowered by Jason, to support the dial's weight evenly. The strop carabiners are attached to the shackles, and Jason tensions the rope slightly. Stuart can now concentrate on removing the upper iron pins.
These top ones are going to come loose. There's not much holding them in.
Some are fairly loose, others very tricky to prise
There's a
out.
piece of wood inside, should stop the dial works falling down.
The moment of truth. The upper pins are gone, and the dial is just resting on the lowest ones. It should release. With the slight tension from the strop, a bit of levering, and the dial swings free, releasing decades of brick dust trapped beneath.
Okay, Jay. You got older, haven't you? Right. Going down with it now, mate. Hang on, get that source off that wire on that stone, mate. Okay, mate. Okay.
Coordinating their movements carefully, Stuart abseils down on his ropes while guiding the dial, which Jason gently lowers.
Okay, Jay? Okay, roger that. Rest of that? Okay, man.
Got all the action, guys.
Okay. Just rest there a second.
negotiating the vestry roof.
Okay, Jace, you're down at that, mate.
The dial is safely grounded for our first close-up look at it.
There's usually a date on the back when it was last done.
Is there a date?
No, there isn't. Not as I can see, no.
So what's the metal?
Copper.
It is. Ah, we were wondering what it was.
I said brass.
Yeah,
I was wrong.
copper.
Copper. Yeah, most of the fixings are just pulled out, so it needed refixing.
Don't
anyway.
tell us that.
It could have fallen down at any time.
It wouldn't have done because the dial works would have held it down.
yeah,
Yeah.
of course they would.
But I mean, they usually just drop a bit, but that's about it.
Yes.
No, that's fine. Thursday. Yeah, it'd be painted today, painted and up to finish today with the paint that I've got, and then remark it and gild it tomorrow, put it back up Thursday, hopefully.
During the afternoon and evening, Stuart continued the refurbishment work on site, stripping back the old paint, resurfacing, priming and applying a new gloss black finish. But overnight, however, some residue of ancient paint had reacted badly with the modern materials and the finish couldn't be used. Stuart decided to return the dial to Smith & Darby's premises, where the original copper surface could be revealed and the restoration completed in ideal conditions. Stuart then conveyed our dial to Smith of Darby's works. This film shows how a similar dial from St James Church, Fulmer in Buckinghamshire, was regilded. Before stripping and cleaning the old paint and gold off the copper convex dial, measurements and photographs are taken. These are used to recreate the dial design as a computer file. Clock dials were all originally hand-drawn, so every one is unique in some way or other. Maybe in the width of the thick and thin strokes, or in the shape of the minute marks. Sometimes the numerals have serifs, the bars that cap the end of the upright strokes, but others do not. Serifs themselves can vary in style. The aim is always to replicate the original design as closely as possible. The computer file is used to control a plotter-cutter machine, which cuts the outline of numerals into the masking vinyl. The internal shapes are then lifted away, producing a stencil. Masking vinyl is a low-tack, adhesive-backed material, which will only stay in place during the gilding process. As the dial being worked on here is convex or slightly domed, the stencils are split into segments, so as to eliminate any creases when laying them down. The marks and positions of the 12, 6, 3 and 9 numerals are made first. Each stencil on its backing paper is then put in its place. The remaining ones are carefully measured for correct position. The backing paper is eased out from under the masking vinyl. And the masking vinyl carefully smoothed down in position. When the mask is complete, all is ready to begin the gilding process. Gold size is used for the bond between dial and gold leaf. It's a traditional linseed oil based preparation, and once applied is left, usually overnight, to cure, so that it has just the right degree of tackiness to accept the gold. The gold leaf comes on a transfer paper. It's 23.5 carat gold, beaten to a thickness of just 6/millionths of an inch, and that's the double thickness kind. When the gold touches the sized surface, it's released from the paper. More leaf can be reapplied where needed to make sure that the entire numeral is covered. With all the numerals and minute marks covered in gold, once more the dial must be left overnight to allow the size to cure further. Then the masks may be carefully peeled back to reveal the design in sharp focus, a major benefit of computer cutting. Meanwhile, the hands have also been sized and gilded. After a final polish, they too are ready for fitting, once the restored dial has been installed on the building. With all the masking vinyl removed, and after a final clean and polish, the dial is now ready, sparkling and as good as new, in all its restored glory. "5 weeks have now passed since Stuart and Jason lowered the dial for restoration, and now Stuart has returned to complete the job of reinstallation. Overnight, the newly restored dial is stored, secure in its bubble wrap, in the bell tower. A new ropework colleague, Jim, has joined Stuart this time. He'll fix the abseil ropes for the reinstallation phase. Before raising it into position, Stuart needs to prepare the dial site to receive the restored dial. One of the original square iron pegs which couldn't be removed will obstruct its placement and must be ground off to allow the dial to seat properly. With weather conditions much finer than on his last visit, the abseil down the tower is much easier, and Stuart gets to work on the offending peg. The holes he drilled through the dial's rim and into the stone prior to removing the dial are now plugged to receive the fixing screws. It's easier to abseil down once he's finished the preparatory work. Loosening the protective wrapping, the dial is reattached to the strop hoist. Working together, with Jim taking the weight via a pulley from above, Stuart positions the dial ready for the hoist. Gradually, he climbs the abseil rope while guiding the dial, finally manoeuvring it into position. He guides it gently onto the lower iron pegs, which were left for this purpose. It's now just a matter of fixing the many screws into the previously plugged holes. Eventually, the dial is secured in place. Its cover wrap is removed, revealing the beautifully restored face to the many onlookers. Time for a break from the arduous working position and to admire the work so far. Then up the tower once more. To fit the hands, which are now resplendent in their covering of fresh gold leaf. Stuart tests the balance and roughly positions the hands. These will require finer adjustment inside the tower as the hand's shaft is reconnected to the clock mechanism. Suddenly, the old familiar clock tower looks right again, but so much improved by its dial's facelift. A final descent of the abseil ropes, and the aerial work is completed.
Got a few adjustments on the inside.
Jim removes the ropes, and his work is done for the day, leaving the clock face and tower to be admired for the next half-century. But the job isn't over yet. Before leaving, the clock must be precisely set up.
That's better.
Stuart is a craftsman with many years of experience in clock maintenance, and with a huge enthusiasm for his work and a respect for the engineering of the past, and he will go that extra mile before leaving. Using his expertise, he fine-tunes the parts to keep better time-keeping in the future. Each little adjustment requires an exhausting trip back down the ladders to view the result.
We've got here now is what we call the con rod, and this connects the clock mechanism to the dial, which I thought was going to be too long then.
The shaft connecting the hands to the clock is reconnected and the hands positioned.
Gets to the hour, it'll let off from there and also let the strike off.
Finally, Stuart is satisfied and prepares for the long journey back to Derbyshire. It's good to know that this clock will be in the hands of craftsmen like Stuart and his colleagues from Smith of Derby for the foreseeable future.